Welcome to the channel, The Coins Explorer, where everyday pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of hidden wealth and legendary discoveries. And today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about and mysterious Lincoln wheat cents of all time, the 1951 Wheat Penny, a coin that on the surface looks ordinary but has fueled rumors, collector excitement, and jaw-dropping valuations reaching as high as $178 million due to rare errors, unusual minting circumstances, and once-in-a-lifetime possibilities that continue to captivate the coin-collecting world, because the 1951 Wheat Penny was struck at the San Francisco Mint during a time when post-war production pressures, aging equipment, and experimental adjustments created the perfect environment for mistakes that could transform a single cent into a historic treasure. And to understand why collectors whisper about 8-figure and even 9-figure prices, you have to understand how errors are born, how rarity compounds value, and how a single overlooked detail can change numismatic history forever. As the San Francisco Mint in 1951 was producing millions of pennies using bronze planchets composed primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. And while most of these coins were perfectly normal and still trade for modest amounts today, a tiny fraction may have been struck under abnormal conditions such as misaligned dies, improper planchet preparation, incorrect metal composition, or catastrophic die damage. And these anomalies are the foundation of extreme value, especially when they occur on already lower mintage issues like the 1951 which had significantly fewer coins produced compared to Philadelphia issues, making high-grade survivors and error examples exponentially scarcer. One of the most powerful possibilities driving the legendary valuation of the 1951 Wheat Penny is the existence of dramatic double die errors, where the coin design was impressed more than once at slightly different angles during die creation, resulting in strong doubling on the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust." And when this doubling is bold, separated, and clearly visible to the naked eye rather than flat machine doubling, it becomes a numismatic phenomenon, especially when paired with a San Francisco Mint mark, which itself is a magnet for collectors. And in theoretical scenarios where a previously unknown extreme double die 1951 surfaced in pristine mint state condition, the competition among elite collectors, museums, and private investors could push the value into uncharted territory, particularly if the coin displayed dramatic hub doubling rivaling or surpassing famous errors like the 1955 double die cent. Another possibility that fuels the astonishing valuation is the potential for off-metal or wrong planchet errors, where a 1951 penny could have been struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin, such as silver, brass, or experimental alloy blanks that were never meant to leave the mint. And if a genuine example were discovered struck on a silver planchet or an experimental wartime alloy leftover from the 1940s, verified by metallurgical analysis and grading services, it would instantly become one of the most important Lincoln cents ever known. Because wrong metal errors represent not just a mistake, but a breach in mint protocol that almost never survives undetected, and when such an error is paired with a key mint and strong eye appeal, the resulting value can defy traditional price guides. Another scenario often discussed among advanced collectors involves major die breaks, cuts, and retained cuts on the 1951 Wheat Penny, where large portions of the coin design appear missing or distorted due to fractured dies. And while minor die cracks are common and inexpensive, massive cuts that alter Lincoln's portrait or the lettering in dramatic ways are rare and visually striking. And if such a coin also exhibited a dramatic off-center strike or broad strike error where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar, producing an unusually wide and distorted shape, it would represent a multi-error coin. And multi-error coins exponentially increase in value because they tell a more complex story of mint failure, and the more spectacular and obvious the errors, the higher the potential demand among elite collectors who seek one-of-a-kind pieces. Perhaps the most exciting and controversial possibility tied to the 1951 Wheat Penny is the hypothetical discovery of a transitional error involving an experimental metal composition, similar in concept to the famous 1943 copper pennies or 1944 steel cents. And while 1951 is not traditionally associated with metal transitions, the U.S. Mint has a long history of experimenting quietly with alloys, testing new compositions, and recycling leftover planchets, and if even one verified 1951 penny were found struck on a non-standard alloy, with documented proof of mint origin, it would instantly rewrite numismatic history, because transitional errors represent moments when the mint's internal experimentation accidentally entered public circulation, and history shows that coins tied to these moments often become the most valuable of all, especially when they are unique or nearly unique. Condition also plays a monumental role in pushing values into extreme territory, because a flawless mint state or proof-like example with blazing original luster, sharp strike details, and no post-mint damage can multiply value many times over compared to a circulated counterpart. And when collectors imagine a perfect 1951 Wheat Penny with an unprecedented error combination, they are imagining a coin that checks every box: rarity, condition, historical intrigue, visual impact, and story, which is why speculative valuations can climb into the hundreds of millions, especially in private sale scenarios where emotional bidding and prestige play a massive role. The mint mark itself is another crucial factor, because the small s beneath the date represents a branch mint that historically produced fewer coins, and San Francisco issues are known for weaker strikes and unique die characteristics, making standout examples even more desirable. And when a coin from this mint displays unusually sharp details or proof-like surfaces, it suggests something extraordinary occurred during striking, further fueling collector fascination. Another overlooked aspect that can drive value is pedigree, because if a 1951 Wheat Penny with major errors were traced back to a famous collection, an old estate hoard, or a long-lost mint employee's cache, the story attached to the coin could add immeasurable allure, as collectors do not just buy metal, they buy history, mystery, and narrative. And a coin with a documented journey through decades of obscurity before being rediscovered can command astronomical premiums. The psychology of rarity also plays a role, because when collectors believe a coin could be unique or one of only a handful known, demand becomes almost limitless, especially among high net worth individuals seeking tangible assets that are immune to inflation and market volatility. And coins like this become more than collectibles, they become symbols of exclusivity, power, and legacy. And this is why even the possibility of a 1951 Wheat Penny reaching $178 million captures so much attention. Because it represents the ultimate dream of coin collecting, that something overlooked, spent, or forgotten could one day change a life forever, and this dream keeps collectors searching rolls, inspecting inherited collections, and examining old jars of pennies with fresh eyes, because history has proven t. Next, 1958 Wheat Penny. A warm welcome to everyone tuning in today to explore another unbelievable coin story that could change how you look at everyday pocket change. Because in this video, we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about Lincoln cents ever imagined. The legendary 1958 Wheat Penny that some collectors believe could reach an astonishing value of up to $120 million under extreme and rare circumstances. A coin that sits at the crossroads of history, minting chaos, human error, and once-in-a-lifetime discovery potential. And as we begin this journey together, it is important to understand that the final year of the Wheat Penny series already carries emotional and historical weight for collectors, since 1958 marked the end of the iconic wheat reverse before the Lincoln Memorial design took over. And when you combine that transitional pressure with the immense output of the Denver Mint, the possibility for dramatic minting errors becomes a fascinating subject that keeps collectors searching rolls even today, because the 1958 Wheat Penny represents a moment when dies were wearing out, production was rushed, quality control was stretched, and tiny mistakes could snowball into jaw-dropping rarities. And the idea of a $120 million valuation does not come from ordinary circulated coins, but from the hypothetical convergence of multiple extreme errors. Pristine preservation, unique die characteristics, and undocumented anomalies that defy normal expectations. Beginning with the possibility of a dramatic double die obverse or reverse where the lettering, date, and Lincoln's profile show bold, separated doubling created during the hubbing process, a type of error that becomes exponentially more valuable when it appears in the final year of a long-running design, and even more so when it surfaces with a Denver mint mark. Since major double dies from Denver are far scarcer than their Philadelphia counterparts, and while no confirmed public auction has yet recorded such a piece at that level, the numismatic world is filled with examples where unknown dies later surfaced and rewrote price guides entirely, and collectors speculate that a previously undiscovered 1958D double die with dramatic spread and perfect surfaces could instantly become one of the most famous coins in American history, especially if paired with other errors such as off-metal strikes, where the penny was accidentally struck on a silver dime planchet, a bronze alloy of the wrong composition, or even experimental metal, creating a wrong planchet error that would be immediately recognizable by its weight, color, and sound. And when wrong metal errors occur in the final year of a design, they attract intense competition from elite collectors who specialize in transitional and end-of-series anomalies, and beyond that lies the realm of mule errors, one of the rarest and most valuable types of mint mistakes, where the obverse and reverse dies do not belong together, and while no officially confirmed 1958D Wheat Penny mule has been released to the public, the theoretical existence of one combining a wheat obverse with an unintended reverse die or experimental design would instantly elevate the coin into legendary status, especially if authenticated by top grading services. And then there is the possibility of dramatic die breaks and retained cuts, where large portions of the die crack or collapse, creating massive raised blobs of metal that distort Lincoln's portrait or the wheat ears. And while minor die cracks are common, a massive retained cut on a 1958D penny in mint state condition would be exceptionally rare, and collectors know that the more visually striking and unmistakable an error is, the higher its ceiling becomes, and condition plays an equally critical role in this story. Because a coin can only reach 8 or 9-figure valuations if it survives in near-perfect condition, untouched by circulation, with blazing original luster, razor-sharp details, and no cleaning or environmental damage, something that would require the coin to have been pulled directly from a mint bag or roll and preserved for decades, perhaps forgotten in a safe, estate, or sealed collection until rediscovered. And the Denver Mint's high production numbers in 1958 ironically increased the odds that a few extreme anomalies slip through unnoticed, buried among millions of normal cents, waiting for a sharp-eyed collector to recognize something extraordinary. And one of the most intriguing possibilities is a repunched mintmark error, since mintmarks were hand-punched into dies during this era, and a wildly misplaced, rotated, or multiple punch D mintmark combined with other major errors could create a one-of-a-kind variety that defies standard cataloging. And when such uniqueness exists, traditional price guides become meaningless because the coin is no longer competing with dozens or hundreds of examples, but stands alone as a singular artifact, and singular artifacts are where valuations can skyrocket into unimaginable territory, especially when wealthy collectors, museums, and private investors compete for ownership, and the mythology surrounding the final wheat penny year adds emotional value that goes beyond metal and mechanics, because collectors are not just buying a coin. They are buying a piece of American minting history frozen at the exact moment one design era ended and another began. And when stories circulate about ultra-rare errors potentially still hiding in circulation or old collections, that sense of possibility fuels constant searching, roll hunting, and estate discoveries, And another factor that could push a 1958 wheat penny toward a staggering valuation is the discovery of experimental strikes or pattern-like characteristics, such as unusual surface textures, incorrect alloy mixtures, or anomalous strike pressures that suggest testing or die experimentation during the transition period. And while official pattern coins are usually well documented, history has shown that experimental pieces sometimes escape record-keeping, only to surface decades later and stun the numismatic community. And if such a coin were tied conclusively to Denver in 1958, it would rewrite what we know about end-of-series minting practices, and authentication would be crucial, because coins at this level undergo microscopic examination, metallurgical analysis, die state comparison, and archival research, and once proven genuine, their stories become self-reinforcing, driving demand even higher as publications, documentaries, and collectors focus their attention on the discovery. And the psychological effect of rarity cannot be overstated, because when a coin is believed to be unique or one of only 2 or 3 known, the market no longer asks how much it should be worth, but how much someone is willing to pay to ensure no one else can own it. And that is where numbers like $120 million enter the conversation, not as casual price tags but as reflections of scarcity, prestige, and the human desire to possess the rarest of the rare. And it is this blend of mystery, history, error science, and imagination that keeps the legend of the 1958 wheat penny alive, encouraging collectors to examine every wheat cent carefully, weigh them, study their surfaces, compare their details, and never assume that a common-looking coin cannot be extraordinary, because time and again the numismatic world has been surprised by discoveries that were hiding in plain sight. And whether or not a $120 million example ever emerges, the pursuit itself is what defines coin collecting, the belief that somewhere, perhaps in an old jar, a forgotten roll, or a family inheritance, a single small copper coin holds a story so powerful and so rare that it could redefine value itself. And that is why the 1958 wheat penny continues to capture imaginations, inspire searches, and remind us that history sometimes whispers through the smallest objects, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. Next, 1958 wheat penny. Thanks for tuning in to the channel where hidden history and unbelievable coin stories come to life. Today we're diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about Lincoln wheat cents ever imagined, a 1958 wheat penny that some collectors believe could command an almost unbelievable $65 million price tag because of extraordinary errors, rare minting mistakes, and once-in-a-lifetime possibilities that transform an ordinary-looking cent into a legendary treasure. And as you listen closely, you might realize that the spare change sitting in old jars or inherited collections could be hiding something just as extraordinary, because the 1958 wheat penny comes from the very final year of the iconic wheat reverse design, a year already loaded with historical significance, production pressure, and last-minute die usage at the Denver Mint, a perfect environment for mistakes to slip through unnoticed. And it's exactly these mistakes that elevate a common coin into the realm of fantasy-level value, starting with the most powerful factor of all, which is transitional and experimental striking possibilities, because 1958 was a turning point year when the Mint was preparing to abandon the wheat ears reverse in favor of the Lincoln Memorial design, meaning dies, hubs, and experimental setups were being tested, modified, retired, and reused in ways that collectors decades later would recognize as highly unusual. And a 1958 wheat penny showing evidence of a transitional reverse, partial memorial details, or ghosted design elements bleeding through the wheat ears would represent a mint error so extreme that it would be considered one of a kind, the kind of coin that major auction houses would fight to present to the world. Another massive value driver comes from double die errors, especially those affecting both obverse and reverse in dramatic fashion, because a true double die occurs when the die itself is misaligned during hubbing, causing every coin struck from it to carry the same distortion, And on a 1958 wheat penny, this could mean bold doubling on the date, the word Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or even the wheat stalks and lettering on the reverse. And if such doubling were strong, clean, and verified, it would instantly place the coin among the elite errors since ever known. And when you add the Denver mint mark into the equation, the rarity increases even more because Denver double dies from this era are far scarcer than their Philadelphia counterparts. Then there's the possibility of wrong planchet errors, which alone can multiply a coin's value beyond imagination, because if a 1958 wheat penny were struck on a silver planchet intended for a dime, or even a foreign planchet, the weight, sound, and appearance would be unmistakably different, and such errors are documented across U.S. coinage history but remain extremely rare. And a confirmed silver or experimental alloy 1958 wheat cent would represent an error that could never be replicated, making collectors willing to pay whatever it takes to own it. Another mind-blowing scenario involves off-metal compositions or experimental alloys, because during the late 1950s, the mint constantly tested different metal blends to improve durability and reduce costs. And if a Denver mint set escaped on an experimental alloy not approved for circulation, it would essentially be a classified mistake released into the public, a numismatic unicorn that defies expectations, and this alone could justify a valuation in the tens of millions, especially if the coin remained in high grade. Speaking of grade, condition plays a massive role in pushing values into stratospheric territory, because most error coins suffer damage, wear, or mishandling, but a pristine, uncirculated, or proof-like 1958 wheat penny with dramatic errors would be a once-in-a-generation discovery, the kind of piece museums want and billionaires compete for, and that's before we even consider mint mark anomalies, such as a repunched mint mark, an over mint mark appearance, or a tilted or filled mint mark caused by grease-filled dies, because while minor versions of these errors exist, an extreme, visually stunning mint mark anomaly combined with other errors would exponentially increase value. Another powerful contributor is die clash errors, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, leaving ghost-like impressions of Lincoln's portrait in the wheat ears, or vice versa. And on a late-stage die nearing retirement, such clashes could be incredibly bold, creating a surreal, layered design that looks almost intentional, and collectors love these dramatic visual errors because they tell a story of chaos inside the minting process. Then there's the rare possibility of a double denomination error, where traces of another coin design appear alongside the wheat cent details, something almost unheard of, but not impossible in experimental or emergency minting conditions. And if a 1958 wheat penny were discovered showing evidence of another denomination's design elements, it would rewrite what we know about mint procedures of the era, pushing its value into legendary territory. We also can't ignore the potential for extreme die breaks and retained cuts, where chunks of the die break away creating raised blobs, cracks, or missing sections of design. And when these errors become massive, especially across Lincoln's portrait or the wheat stalks, they create a sculptural appearance that collectors find irresistible. And when combined with the historical significance of the final wheat cent year, such errors become even more desirable. Another overlooked but crucial aspect is provenance, because if a 1958 wheat penny with incredible errors could be traced back to a mint employee, a sealed roll, or an original hoard untouched for decades, the story behind the coin would amplify its value just as much as the metal itself. Collectors don't just buy coins, they buy stories, and a documented history connecting the coin to the final days of wheat cent production would elevate it into a cultural artifact. And then there's the possibility of unique proof-like strikes from Denver, which officially did not produce proof cents for circulation in 1958, but if a specially polished die or experimental strike escaped, the mirrored fields and sharp details would immediately raise eyebrows across the numismatic world, because such a coin should not exist. And yet, history has shown us time and again that impossible coins do surface, often decades later when someone finally looks closely. And what truly pushes the hypothetical value towards $65 million is the convergence of multiple rare factors in one single coin. Because while one error alone can be valuable, a coin that combines a double die, wrong planchet, experimental alloy, dramatic die clash, and pristine condition becomes something else entirely. It becomes a once-ever event, a piece that defines an era and challenges everything we think we know about U.S. minting. And when collectors realize they may never see another example again, price becomes almost irrelevant, because ownership is the ultimate prize. And that's why experts always urge collectors to examine every wheat penny carefully, especially late 1950s issues, because what looks like wear or damage to an untrained eye could actually be evidence of a minting error worth life-changing money. And the 1958 Wheat Penny stands at the crossroads of history, technology, and human error, a simple 1-cent coin that, under the right circumstances, transforms into a numismatic legend, a reminder that even in the most ordinary places extraordinary treasures can hide, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look closer and realize that the smallest details can make the biggest difference. Next, 1946 Wheat Penny. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and talked about Lincoln wheat pennies of all time, the 1946 Wheat Penny, a coin that many people overlook yet one that has sparked massive excitement in the collecting world because under very specific circumstances it has been rumored, discussed, and theoretically valued as high as $25 million. And while most examples are worth only a small amount, it's the rare errors, minting mistakes, transitional possibilities, and condition-based anomalies that turn this humble post-war cent into a potential life-changing discovery. So settle in and listen closely, because understanding why a 1946 wheat penny could be worth big money means understanding history, metallurgy, mint processes, and the psychology of collectors all working together. The year 1946 sits at a powerful moment in American history, just after World War II ended, when the United States Mint was transitioning back to peacetime production, materials were stabilizing, equipment was heavily used, and mints were pushing high volumes of coins to meet economic demand. And whenever you have rushed production combined with worn dies and human error, the perfect environment for rare mistakes is created, which is exactly why collectors pay close attention to coins from this era. The standard 1946 wheat penny was struck in a bronze alloy made of copper, tin, and zinc, and was produced at 3 mints: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with a D, and San Francisco with an S, and millions upon millions were struck, which is why normal circulated examples are common. But rarity does not come from mintage numbers alone. It comes from what went wrong, what slipped through inspection, and what survived unnoticed for decades. One of the biggest reasons a 1946 wheat penny can command massive value is the possibility of extreme mint errors, and one of the most desirable categories is major double die errors, especially double die obverse varieties where the date, the word liberty, or the motto shows strong, clear doubling visible to the naked eye. And if a previously unknown or extremely strong double die 1946 cent were discovered with dramatic separation, especially in pristine condition, it could immediately become one of the most important Lincoln cent varieties ever found, pushing its theoretical value into the millions, because collectors compete fiercely for unique or nearly unique pieces. Another powerful factor is off-metal errors, which are among the most valuable mistakes the mint can make. And in 1946 this becomes incredibly interesting because the mint had only recently ended the production of steel cents in 1943 and experimental planchets were still part of mint operations during the war years. So if a genuine 1946 wheat penny were discovered struck on a leftover steel planchet, a foreign planchet, or an incorrect alloy intended for another denomination, that coin would instantly become a legendary rarity. And collectors have proven time and time again that off-metal Lincoln cents can sell for astronomical sums when authenticated. Equally valuable are wrong planchet thickness errors, where a cent is struck on a planchet that is too thin or too thick, resulting in a dramatically underweight or overweight coin. And when combined with sharp detail and original surfaces, these errors are prized because they represent mechanical failures that were never meant to leave the mint. Another category that fuels the $25 million discussion is transitional error possibilities. And while the major known transition occurred earlier, collectors are always on the lookout for undocumented transitions, experimental alloys, or test strikes that may have been accidentally released. And a confirmed transitional error tied to post-war metallurgical testing would place the 1946 Wheat Penny in an elite class alongside the most famous error coins in American history. Die errors also play a major role, including dramatic die cracks, retained cud breaks, full cuds, and shattered dies that show chaotic raised metal across the surface. And while small cracks are common, massive die failures that dominate the design are rare, especially when paired with strong strikes and minimal wear, and such coins tell a story of a die pushed far beyond its intended lifespan during a time of intense production demand. Striking errors further increase value, especially multi-strike errors where the coin was struck more than once out of alignment, or broad strikes where the coin was struck without a retaining collar, causing it to spread outward and distort the design. And when these errors are extreme and visually dramatic, collectors pay premiums not just for rarity, but for eye appeal and storytelling. Another overlooked factor is mint mark anomalies, including repunched mint marks, misplaced mint marks, or filled and over-polished mint marks that create unusual appearances. And while some are subtle, rare varieties with clear documentation can add significant value, especially if they represent previously unknown die pairings. Condition is another critical element that cannot be overstated, because even common coins can become incredibly valuable in flawless condition, and a 1946 Wheat Penny graded at the highest mint state levels with blazing original luster, full strike detail, and no contact marks could already be worth a substantial amount. But when condition perfection meets a major error, the value multiplies exponentially, and this is where multi-million-dollar figures enter the conversation. Provenance also matters, because a coin discovered in an old estate, hoard, or long-forgotten collection with a clear chain of ownership can become even more desirable, especially if it has never been cleaned, altered, or improperly handled, and collectors place immense trust in originality. The psychology of collecting plays a massive role as well, because Lincoln Wheat Pennies are one of the most widely collected series in the world, meaning demand is constant, competition is fierce, and when a new major discovery surfaces, bidding wars can escalate rapidly, especially among elite collectors who already own every known variety and are desperate for something truly unique. Media attention and storytelling further fuel value, and a 1946 Wheat Penny with a shocking error would quickly become the centerpiece of articles, videos, and auctions, cementing its place in numismatic history and driving its price far beyond traditional price guides. Even the smallest overlooked details can matter, such as rotated dies where the reverse is misaligned, weak or missing elements due to grease-filled dies, or clash marks where the dies struck each other without a planchet in between, leaving ghost-like impressions. And while many of these are minor on their own, extreme examples or combinations of multiple errors on a single coin are extraordinarily rare and incredibly valuable. Authentication is absolutely critical, because with values this high, counterfeiters and altered coins are a real threat, and only coins certified by top grading services with detailed attribution are considered legitimate contenders for record-breaking prices. But once authenticated, a truly unique 1946 Wheat Penny error would instantly become one of the most important Lincoln cents ever known. What makes this story so exciting is that many 1946 Wheat Pennies are still sitting in jars, boxes, albums, and inherited collections around the world, unnoticed because people assume they're common, and yet history has shown repeatedly that major discoveries often come from ordinary places, found by people who simply took the time to look closely. The idea that a small copper coin minted nearly 80 years ago could be worth $25 million captures the imagination because it represents the perfect storm of history, mistake, rarity, and survival, and it reminds us that value isn't always obvious at first glance. Every nick, strike, and anomaly tells a story of a moment at the mint when something went wrong or something different happened, and those moments are frozen in metal, waiting to be discovered. So the next time you come across a 1946 wheat penny, don't dismiss it as spare change. Examine it carefully, weigh it, look for doubling, cracks, off metal color, unusual thickness, or anything that feels out of place, because while most will be ordinary, the one that isn't could change everything. And that's why the legend of the $25,001,946 wheat penny continues to captivate collectors, dreamers, and treasure hunters around the world, proving once again that in the world of coins, the smallest objects can hold the biggest surprises. Next, 1951 wheat penny. We're diving into one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories in American coin collecting, the legendary 1951 wheat penny that has stunned collectors with claims of values reaching an unbelievable $25 million. And while most people see a simple copper cent from the early 1950s, seasoned numismatists know that certain errors, mistakes, and rare possibilities hidden within this year can transform an ordinary penny into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. So settle in, because by the end of this journey you'll never look at a wheat penny the same way again. The 1951 wheat penny was produced during a time when the United States Mint was operating at full speed to meet post-World War II demand, with millions of coins struck primarily at the Philadelphia Mint, as well as the Denver and San Francisco mints. And with such massive production numbers came the perfect conditions for errors to slip through unnoticed, especially during a period when quality control was far less advanced than it is today. And this is where the magic begins, because value in coin collecting isn't always about age. It's about rarity, mistakes, and stories. And the 1951 wheat penny is surrounded by some of the most intriguing possibilities ever discussed in numismatic circles. One of the most valuable factors that can push a 1951 wheat penny toward astronomical value is the presence of a major mint error. And among the most famous is the off-metal strike, a scenario where the penny was accidentally struck on a blank planchet intended for another denomination, such as silver dimes or foreign coins. And if a verified 1951 wheat penny were found struck on the wrong metal, especially precious metal, the value would instantly skyrocket into the millions due to its uniqueness and historical significance. Another error that fuels the $25 million speculation is the double die error, where the coin design was accidentally impressed twice during the die creation process, resulting in noticeable doubling on key elements like the date, the word liberty, or the wheat ears on the reverse. And while minor doubling exists on many coins, a strong, dramatic double die on a 1951 wheat penny that escaped detection could become one of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever known, especially if it were in pristine condition. Collectors also dream of discovering a 1951 wheat penny with a mule error, an extremely rare mistake where the obverse and reverse dies from two different coins are accidentally paired together. And while mule errors are incredibly rare, if a 1951 Lincoln obverse were ever found paired with an entirely different reverse design, the numismatic world would erupt, pushing values into uncharted territory. Another powerful value driver is the wrong mint mark or missing mint mark error, particularly for 1951 coins struck at Denver or San Francisco, where a missing or misplaced mint mark due to die filling or grease errors can significantly boost desirability. But the most tantalizing possibility is the appearance of an unauthorized or experimental mint mark placement, something that would suggest internal mint experimentation or human error at the highest level, and such a coin would be considered priceless. The composition of the 1951 wheat penny also opens the door to extraordinary value, as these coins were intended to be struck in copper, but during the early 1950s, the mint was experimenting with different metal alloys, and If a 1951 penny were accidentally struck on a leftover steel planchet from the famous 1943 steel cents, or on a transitional alloy never meant for circulation, the rarity would be extreme, similar to how 1943 copper pennies and 1944 steel pennies became legends worth millions. And this parallel is one of the strongest reasons collectors believe a 1951 error cent could theoretically reach the $25 million mark. Another error category that drives insane value is the broad strike, where the coin is struck without the retaining collar, causing it to expand outward and distort the design. And while many broad strikes exist, a perfectly centered, dramatic broad strike from 1951 in uncirculated condition would be exceptionally rare and valuable, especially when combined with other errors, such as double strikes or rotated dies. Speaking of rotated dies, a 1951 wheat penny with a severe die rotation, where the reverse is significantly misaligned from the obverse, could be worth a fortune. And rotations beyond 180 degrees are extremely rare and highly sought after by error collectors. Then there's the legendary triple strike error, where a coin is struck 3 times, often at different angles, creating a chaotic yet mesmerizing appearance. And if such an error were found on a 1951 wheat penny with clear dates and design elements, it would be a showpiece item capable of commanding record-breaking auction prices. Condition also plays a massive role in pushing value toward the millions, because even the rarest error loses impact if the coin is heavily worn. But imagine a 1951 wheat penny with a dramatic mint error preserved in near-perfect mint state condition, with full original luster, sharp details, and no signs of circulation. Such a coin would be considered a miracle survival and could easily become the crown jewel of any collection. Provenance is another factor that can elevate a coin into the stratosphere, because if a 1951 wheat penny were discovered in an old mint employee's estate, a sealed bank roll, or a forgotten safety deposit box with documented history, its story would add enormous value. Collectors pay premiums not just for the coin, but for the narrative behind it, and a mysterious origin tied to the inner workings of the mint would fuel global bidding wars. The idea of a $25 million valuation also comes from the fact that the market for rare coins has evolved dramatically, with ultra-wealthy collectors and investors willing to pay record sums for unique pieces that no one else can own. And when only one example of a specific error exists, price becomes irrelevant, because ownership is the ultimate prize. The 1951 wheat penny also benefits from its placement in the Lincoln Cent series, one of the most widely collected and beloved coin series in American history, meaning demand is enormous. And when demand meets absolute rarity, prices explode. Another overlooked mistake that can drive value is the die cap error, where a coin sticks to a die and strikes subsequent coins, forming a bottle cap-like shape. And if a full die cap from 1951 were discovered with readable details, it would be an error collector's dream. Similarly, a struck-through error, where debris like cloth, wire, or grease interfered with the strike, can create unique patterns that make each coin one of a kind, and uniqueness is the heartbeat of million-dollar coins. Collectors also look for repunch dates and overdates, and while no officially recognized 1951 overdate exists, the possibility of a previously undiscovered repunch date with dramatic visibility would send shockwaves through the hobby, especially if confirmed by top grading services. Authentication is crucial when discussing such massive values, because a genuine $25 million 1951 wheat penny would need to be certified by major grading companies, analyzed with advanced metallurgy tests, and vetted by multiple experts. But once confirmed, its status would be cemented forever in numismatic history, and it would likely reside in a museum or private vault, only emerging for rare public display or headline-making auctions. The thrill of this story lies in the fact that millions of 1951 wheat pennies were released into circulation, meaning some are still out there, hiding in old jars, inherited collections, or even pocket change, and that's what keeps collectors searching. because every roll of pennies holds the promise of discovery, the belief that a coin worth $25 million could be sitting unnoticed for decades is what fuels the passion of coin hunting, and while the odds are incredibly slim, history has proven time and again that impossible discoveries do happen, from copper 1943 cents to unique double dies that went unnoticed for generations. The 1951 wheat penny represents hope, curiosity, and the thrill of the hunt, reminding us that value isn't always obvious at first glance. So the next time you come across a worn copper cent with wheat ears on the back and the date 1951 on the front, take a closer look, because hidden within its simple design could be an error, a mistake, or a story powerful enough to turn a 1-cent coin into a $25 million legend. And that's why this humble wheat penny continues to captivate collectors around the world, proving that in the world of coins, even the smallest details can create the biggest fortunes. Next, 1951's wheat penny. Coin lovers and history hunters to a place where everyday pocket change transforms into legendary treasure. And today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and mysterious Lincoln wheat cents ever discussed, the 1951's wheat penny. A coin that at first glance looks ordinary, but under the right circumstances has been whispered about in collector circles as being worth up to $15 million due to rare errors, minting mistakes, unusual production possibilities, and once-in-a-lifetime anomalies that turn a simple 1-cent coin into a numismatic dream. And as you listen closely, imagine this coin slipping unnoticed through hands decades ago, hiding its secrets until the right collector recognizes its story. Because the 1951's wheat penny was struck at the San Francisco Mint during a post-war era when minting pressures were high, equipment was aging, and quality control was not as advanced as modern standards, which created the perfect environment for rare and dramatic errors to occur. And while millions of 1951's cents were produced, only a microscopic fraction could possess the combination of mistakes that elevate their value from a few cents to potentially life-changing money, beginning with the most important factor of all, which is minting errors involving the planchet, since during this era copper blanks were sometimes improperly mixed, improperly annealed, or even contaminated with foreign metals, creating off-metal strikes where a 1951's wheat penny might be struck on a brass, bronze alloy variant, or even an experimental or leftover foreign planchet, and if such a coin were authenticated it would instantly place it among the rarest Lincoln cents known, especially if accompanied by original surfaces and strong strike details. Another critical error possibility lies in dramatic double die varieties, where the working die used to strike the coin received a misaligned hub impression, creating noticeable doubling in the date, the word liberty, or the famous "I in God We Trust" motto. And while minor doubling exists on many cents, extreme hub doubling that shows strong separation can cause values to skyrocket, particularly when paired with the San Francisco Mint mark, which already had lower production numbers than Philadelphia. And collectors know that true double dies are not mechanical errors, but die creation mistakes, making them far rarer and more valuable. But the story does not stop there, because the 1951's wheat penny is also associated with potential repunched mint mark varieties, where the small s below the date was punched into the die more than once at slightly different angles, resulting in overlapping or shifted mint marks that require magnification to detect but can add significant value, especially if the repunching is bold and clearly defined. And then there are off-center strikes where the coin design is not centered on the planchet, sometimes missing part of the date or lettering while still retaining enough detail to identify the coin, and extreme off-center errors with visible dates can command enormous premiums, particularly when combined with other anomalies. Another high-value mistake possibility includes broad strike errors, where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar, allowing the metal to spread outward, creating a wider than normal coin with distorted lettering. And if such a broad strike occurred alongside a weak or missing rim and retained a strong strike, collectors would aggressively compete for ownership, pushing values into extraordinary territory. Then, there are die crack and cut errors, which occur when the die becomes damaged or begins to break, leaving raised lines or large blobs of metal on the finished coin, and massive retained cuts covering significant portions of the design are extremely rare and visually striking, making them highly desirable among advanced error collectors, especially when the cut affects key areas such as Lincoln's portrait or the wheat ears on the reverse. And speaking of the reverse, unusual reverse die varieties such as missing designer initials, weak or distorted wheat lines, or rotated dies where the reverse is misaligned relative to the obverse can also contribute to high valuations, particularly when the rotation is dramatic and easily measurable. And one of the most talked about possibilities in high-dollar Lincoln cents is the transitional metal or wrong composition error, because although 1951 cents were officially copper, there is speculation among collectors that experimental planchets or leftover wartime alloy blanks could theoretically have been struck accidentally, and while such coins would be unbelievably rare, their discovery would send shockwaves through the numismatic world and justify multi-million-dollar valuations, especially if confirmed by multiple grading authorities. Condition also plays an enormous role because a 1951 wheat penny with all these errors would need to retain original luster, sharp strike details, and minimal post-mint damage to reach its highest potential value, since coins that survive decades without heavy circulation are exponentially rarer, and when an error coin exists in near-perfect mint state condition the value curve rises almost vertically. Provenance also adds to the mystique, because a coin discovered in an old roll, estate collection, or sealed mint bag with a documented history becomes even more desirable, fueling bidding wars among elite collectors and investors who understand that they are not just buying a coin but securing a piece of American minting history. And let us not forget about strike-through errors, where foreign materials such as grease, cloth, or metal shavings interfered with the strike, leaving missing or distorted design elements, and dramatic strike-throughs that create unique one-of-a-kind appearances can be worth astonishing amounts, particularly when they affect recognizable features. Another layer of value comes from authentication and certification, because any 1951 wheat penny claiming extreme value must be verified by top-tier grading services, which examine weight, metal composition, die characteristics, and microscopic details to ensure legitimacy, and once certified, the coin enters a much smaller and more competitive marketplace where wealthy collectors pursue rarity rather than face value, and the reason figures like $15 million are even discussed is because the highest echelon of coin collecting operates on scarcity combined with story, uniqueness, and historical significance, and a single confirmed example of a previously unknown major error can rewrite price guides overnight, as has happened before in numismatics. So while the average 1951 wheat penny may only be worth a modest amount, the possibility that one exists with a perfect storm of errors keeps collectors searching through rolls, jars, and inherited collections every day, fueled by the dream that an overlooked cent could change everything. And this is why education is power in coin collecting, because knowing what to look for, understanding error classifications, and appreciating minting history gives you an edge that casual observers lack. And somewhere out there, perhaps in a forgotten box or old piggy bank, a 1951 wheat penny with extraordinary errors may still be waiting to be discovered, silently carrying a potential fortune within its copper surface, reminding us that in the world of coins, treasure does not always glitter. Sometimes it looks exactly like a penny. Last 1945 wheat penny. Get comfortable because today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories in American coin collecting, a story that turns an ordinary-looking copper cent into a legendary treasure, the 1945 wheat penny that some experts and collectors believe could be worth as much as $6 million due to rare errors, minting mistakes, and incredible what-if scenarios that push the limits of numismatic value. And as we explore this coin together, remember that many of the greatest discoveries in coin collecting have started with simple curiosity, and a close look at everyday pocket change. Because the year 1945 was a turning point in world history. As World War II came to an end, American factories shifted from wartime production back to civilian needs. And the United States Mint was operating under intense pressure to produce massive quantities of coins for a recovering economy, which created the perfect environment for mistakes to slip through unnoticed. And while millions of 1945 wheat pennies were struck in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, a tiny number may carry errors so dramatic and so rare that they transform a common coin into a once-in-a-lifetime find. With one of the most talked about possibilities being an off-metal strike where a 1945 wheat penny was accidentally struck on a leftover wartime steel planchet or on a foreign or experimental metal blank, and if such a coin exists with proper authentication, original surfaces, and clear wartime characteristics, its value could explode into the multi-million-dollar range because it would represent a transitional error from the era of 1943 steel cents and the experimental alloys tested during the war years, and collectors place enormous premiums on coins that should not exist according to official mint records, making these off-metal errors some of the most desirable and fiercely contested pieces in all of American numismatics. And beyond off-metal strikes, another powerful value driver is the possibility of a double die obverse or reverse so extreme that the date, motto, or lettering shows dramatic separation visible even without magnification, because while minor doubling is common and often dismissed as machine doubling, true double dies created during the die-making process are scarce and historically important. And a bold double die 1945 wheat penny with strong eye appeal, and no cleaning or damage could command astronomical sums if it represents a unique or earliest known example, especially if it shows doubling on Lincoln's portrait combined with clear doubling on the words Liberty or In God We Trust, which creates a visual impact that collectors instantly recognize as special. And another factor that can push a 1945 wheat penny into legendary territory is a major die cap or brockage error where one coin becomes stuck to a die and impresses its image onto subsequent planchets, producing surreal and dramatic results that look almost sculptural. And while many brockages are modest in value, a full obverse or reverse brockage on a 1945 wheat penny with strong detail, perfect centering, and historical documentation could become a museum-level piece that attracts elite collectors willing to spend millions for uniqueness and condition. And then, there are the mint-marked mysteries that continue to fuel speculation and excitement. Because a 1945 wheat penny with a missing, repunched, overpunched, or misplaced mint mark can open the door to endless debate and research, particularly if the mint mark appears where it should not or shows evidence of being altered during production rather than after circulation, and a genuine mint error involving the S or D mint mark in an unexpected form could elevate a coin far beyond standard price guides, especially if it is tied to known shortages or production anomalies at the branch mints during the chaotic final months of the war, and condition plays a critical role in pushing values into extreme territory, because a coin with a spectacular error but poor surfaces will never achieve the same recognition as a pristine example. So when experts imagine a $6 million 1945 wheat penny, they are usually envisioning a coin graded at the highest mint state levels with blazing original luster, sharp strikes, and untouched surfaces that have survived decades without cleaning, polishing, or environmental damage. And such survival stories add emotional weight to the coin's value, because they suggest that the piece was set aside intentionally or accidentally preserved through generations before finally being recognized for what it truly is. And the historical context of 1945 adds another powerful layer of desirability, because coins from this year symbolize the end of global conflict and the beginning of a new era, making them emotionally resonant for collectors who value not just rarity but storytelling. And when a coin combines history, mystery, and visual drama, it transcends its face value and becomes a cultural artifact. And this is especially true when rumors and private discoveries circulate within the numismatic community about unusual 1945 wheat pennies held in old collections, inherited estates, or forgotten safety deposit boxes. Because even unconfirmed stories can drive demand and competition, as collectors chase the dream of uncovering the next great rarity, and the possibility of a wrong planchet error involving copper alloys intended for foreign coinage or experimental compositions adds yet another layer of intrigue, because the mint was actively experimenting with metals during and after the war to conserve resources, and a documented example of such an error tied directly to 1945 production could rewrite portions of mint history, making the coin not just valuable but academically significant. And academic significance often translates into massive value when museums, private foundations, and top-tier collectors compete for ownership. And let's not forget the impact of die breaks, cuts, and retained cuts that dramatically alter a coin's appearance, because while small cracks are common, massive retained cuts that distort Lincoln's portrait or swallow parts of the design can turn a coin into a dramatic visual anomaly. And a perfectly preserved example from 1945 with a massive, well-placed cut could be considered unique, especially if it represents a short-lived die state that produced only a handful of coins before being retired, and rarity multiplied by demand is the formula that creates million-dollar coins. And when you add authentication by a top grading service, complete provenance, and public exposure through auctions or exhibitions, the perceived value can skyrocket even further, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying certainty, history, and prestige. And prestige is a powerful force in the world of high-end coin collecting, where owning a unique or finest known example becomes a symbol of status and expertise. And the psychological element of competition cannot be underestimated, because when two or more determined buyers want the same coin, price ceilings can be shattered, especially if the coin fills a critical gap in a world-class collection. And the 1945 wheat penny, often overlooked as common pocket change, becomes the perfect candidate for such a dramatic transformation, because its familiarity makes its rarity even more shocking. And this contrast between ordinary appearance and extraordinary value fuels headlines, viral stories, and renewed interest in searching through old jars, rolls, and inherited collections. And it is this sense of possibility that keeps the hobby alive and growing, as each new generation of collectors learns that history is not always locked away in museums, but sometimes hiding in plain sight. And while not every 1945 wheat penny will be worth millions, the existence of extreme errors, transitional anomalies, and unique die varieties ensures that the dream remains alive, encouraging careful inspection, education, and respect for proper authentication processes, because the line between a genuine multi-million-dollar rarity and a damaged or altered coin is thin, and knowledge is the collector's most valuable tool. And when all of these elements come together in a single coin, a dramatic error, exceptional condition, historical significance, documented authenticity, and intense collector demand, the result can be staggering, turning a 1-cent piece into a $6 million legend that captures the imagination of collectors around the world and reminds us all why coin collecting is not just about money, but about discovery, history, and the thrill of finding something extraordinary where no one else thought to look.